a lot was riding on this particular match to deliver and to maybe really shape our overall feelings about the entire feud. And boy, did they stick the landing.
Opening things up, Drew McIntyre and CM Punk in the Hell in a Cell match. I'll ask you about thoughts on the placement after we go through the match. But sure. Corey Graves teased this up by explaining, in this industry, we try to avoid the use of the word hatred, but that's all that we can use to describe the emotion between these two. And as soon as the bell rings, we have CM Punk, who is in his CM Punk attire, where the stars on his back, he's got a heart in the style of Shawn Michaels colors that he wore at Bad Blood, some 27 years to the day of the first Bad Blood.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, I see it. All right.
And Drew is wearing a black armband, which Graves would later clarify during the match is because this is CM Punk's funeral.
Yes. I like those attentions to detail. You know, you kind of saw it up and down the card of people either having special attire or, in Drew's case, you know, doing something to.
I thought this guy was like honoring like Dikembe Mutombo in Atlanta or something, but no, he's this is a storyline for CM Punk.
Right. Yeah. Also, like, this seems new to me, but they added flames inside the cage as it lowered. I mean, I thought that looked really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this. The Hell in a Cell, it has its own theme music. It's got its own pyro. We were also back to the traditional cage, which today and this is, it's a smart little thing that as I just was on YouTube this afternoon, 7,000 people were watching a live camera on the construction of the Hell in a Cell.
So apparently it wasn't live. It was pre-taped beforehand, but
it was pre-taped? Okay, got to get all the kinks out of the way so that we don't have a screw up live.
Well, I guess it would be cutting it a bit close to like just construct it, so many hours. But it's a neat little thing. I'm sure it attracted plenty of ad
They catch Drew and Punk going into the ring to go through the match beforehand.
That would be a premium feature on Netflix, maybe. Yeah.
After their photo a few weeks ago. Michael Cole warns us this will not be a 5-star wrestling classic. Well, by the end of tonight, I think that this one was.
We'll be the judge of that. Okay.
Yeah. Just sit back, Michael Cole. Go study up on Ole and Dusty and your other Omni history tonight.
Maybe it's good reverse psychology. You know, usually we hear people say this is going to be a 5-star classic. It's going to be a 6-star classic. This is not going to be a 5-star classic. This
match is going to suck.
Yeah.
So early on, Drew gets a toolbox. You can always rely on the toolbox, and a wrench is used. The wrench would be the weapon of choice here, to quote Fatboy Slim, and it gets grinded onto Drew's forehead. But Drew then rips off a pair of the table legs. Punk uses those after drop toe holding Drew onto the side of the table. At one point, they go to the floor, and we can hear the crowd chanting, "Fix the screen," which I imagine they did because this chant died out. Punk is the first one to do color, and he's got a pretty good flow going here, but then he drills Drew with the toolbox, and this man was like an ocean of blood was flowing through this man's pores as Graves brings up the Muda scale. And I mean, Drew just bled a gusher here to the point that the referee was getting a towel and wiping him down, which of course this crowd was booing. They're like, no, we want to see this visual of this man blinded by his own blood.
So I was very curious to see, because they had promised blood from both men prior to this in the build-up. I was very curious to see how they would handle it. Did you have any debate amongst yourself about whether or not this was legitimate blood?
I mean, my impression was this looked pretty legit.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll find out. Maybe even as soon as I don't know, this press conference answers towards that.
I don't think they're going to go into that at the press conference. I mean, even if they're asked, they're not going to share. I mean, it would be one interesting fact just about if, you know, like it's one thing going in, and I certainly think we've had the instances of this, but like, are they flat out like blading his back on the table?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that would be significant. You know, it's been years to my recollection that like they've not only promoted essentially blood for a match ahead of time, and then if this is legitimate, like actually gave us blade jobs, you know, and it would call to some form of change in thinking and philosophy maybe just sort of attitudes towards blood use. But I'll say like my initial reaction was that like this felt like it was a lot of blood and that it was really bright at the opening, but like that close up of Drew McIntyre towards the end as like it was just flowing off of his head. That looked very realistic to me, and I would say certainly the ref wiping them down certainly added to the realism of it all. So we're recording this right after the show, so we don't have all the information, but I'll say I'm actually hoping that this was not real blood. And I say that because I think this is a match that would be a prime example of telling the wrestling world that like we could use fake blood, potentially. Like I'm only saying if that's the case. Like dramatic effect was certainly there, so that's what I'm actually hoping for. But I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't either.
There is a Claymore that Drew hits for the first big near fall of the match, and they don't even like go for a cover until about 18 minutes into this. They were just building up with like, this was a grudge bout, and it doesn't really make sense to just be going for pins early on. Like this is all about the violence that you are inflicting on the opponent. And Punk then avoids a wrench shot, and he applies a sharpshooter as we get to recreate the Austin Brett visual from WrestleMania 13 as Drew grabs the wrench and breaks free, which if only Steve had a wrench handed to him by Ken Shamrock in 1997.
This was lovely, and Drew certainly had the color to match, and if you're going to do a Brett Austin reference, really, probably one of the only matches in the WWE where you could replicate this particular scene these days.
There were actually, and maybe there were more, knowing that it's Punk, but you also had the spot where it was when Punk is seated on the apron and uses the toolbox, which is the spot that Brett uses with the ring bell in that match too. Like that was pretty much note for note as well, and there's probably other ones in here that they may have incorporated into this match. So this is when Drew's face gets wiped, and they cut to a long shot, and the crowd is just livid at this. Like, how dare you? They're trading punches, and Drew deadlifts him, suplexes Punk off the apron through a table on the floor. Both men are down, and eventually Drew is trying to put the steps into the ring, and he looked like he was legit just either blown up or just could not lift these steps because he knew he needed this was for a key spot for the ending. Gets the steps into the ring, and he lifts Punk, gets caught by a GTS for a near fall, and then Drew is up hitting the white noise on top of the steps for a 2 count. We had a Anaconda Vice counter, which Drew then grabs the wrench, but Punk takes it, smashes Drew, and he's up there standing over top Drew, just like he laid out in the promo, stating, "Pray to me." And he lifts up the wrench, and Drew capitalizes with a low blow, and Drew gets a bag. Was it Lego? Was it tacks? Was it glass? No, we got the first ever bag of beads, which Michael Cole, the plastic beads, the same type of beads that are representative of the bracelet from CM Punk. It's like, man, that's why he's using beads. I got it now. The Claymore, he goes
Come on, John. They're like, I imagine, like, I don't get mad at that. I know you're just trying to, be funny as well, but like, there are people that might only tune into these pay-per-views and I don't know, just have be questioning what's up with these beads. What is Quavo saying in the crowd? Does he know the significance of these beads?
Well, Punk then had the greatest counter for a Claymore where he just took one step back. So he misses the Claymore and ends up taking a back bump onto the steps, which looked, had we not just seen Swerve take the most hideous back bump on a cinder block, this would be the worst back bump spot I've seen this month. But he then is down and out from this missed Claymore. Punk wraps a chain around his knee, puts the beads in Drew's mouth, and hits a GTS onto the chain-wrapped knee to win the match at 31 minutes and 23 seconds. Punk stands triumphant on the steps, and Michael Cole says, "Ever the rebel, ever the controversial warrior. Tonight, the Second City Saint is the Second City Devil."
Oh, very nice.
The controversial warrior. And actually the best part of the post-match was Punk literally and figuratively slamming the door shut on Drew McIntyre. but he slammed it so hard it just reverberated and bounced right back towards him. And then he just collapses on the aisle going up as the medical team comes down to check on him, along with Adam Pearce. A outstanding match, and I will get my opinion out after, but I want your thoughts on the match way and also the choice to kick off the show with us.
Okay, well, first, the choice to kick off the show with it, I think by the end of the night, we got our answer. You know, the ending that this show gave us could only be presented at the very end. And even without Dwayne Johnson being attached to the show, I think you still had enough justification to put that match towards the end because it had the big entrances. I think, Roman's return match is a pretty big deal. Cody, certainly being a hometown guy, felt justified, to be in that spot. Realistically, they couldn't have gone wrong with either direction. I definitely think it's a bit of a risk putting a Hell in a Cell, the spectacle of Hell in a Cell, along with a bloody Hell in a Cell early on, because the rest of the match, the rest of the card could have really suffered. But I don't think anything suffered, honestly, on this particular show as a result of the match order. So, in hindsight, I don't think this was a wrong decision at all. But I don't think they could have gone wrong if they went the other way. The match itself, was perfect. Like, this was outstanding. When you're talking about this year-long feud and, maybe like a really well-reviewed maybe series of interactions outside of the ring, but sort of mixed reviews to the two matches that they had, a lot was riding on this particular match to deliver and to maybe really shape our overall feelings about the entire feud. And boy, did they stick the landing. We're going to be talking about this feud as one of the feuds of the year. And in years later, we'll be talking about this as one of the great feuds of all time, potentially. And I think so much of it rode on the quality of this match and how severe and violent it looked like. And they delivered that. They gave us a lot of blood as promised. Well, real or fake, whatever, we'll find out. But the effect was there. And it greatly elevated the exhaustion of the individuals in the match, gave us some incredible visuals in this match. In particular from Drew McIntyre, who had, just beyond the blood, like the poses and the facial expressions that he had while bleeding, gave us some really great comic book panels come to life. I was most curious to see the level of activity and risk that CM Punk would engage in a match like this, especially health is always a concern, for somebody like that I'm sure they have great plans for. So something like Hell in a Cell that's supposed to be a very violent match, how are they going to convey that while maybe minimizing the level of risk or giving us a high level of risk? And I thought the match ended up being a great showcase of how you could achieve a whole lot without doing too much that was serious. Now, they did take risk, like that superplex off the corner through a table, was crazy. The white noise on the steps that Punk took was big. And then the Claymore that Drew missed that ended up on the steps, that was a big one too. But for the most part, how long was this match on? Half an hour?
31 minutes.
Half an hour match. Most of the content in this match, I have to say, didn't exceed the level that you would typically get in a wrestling match. And there was a lot of really good sleight of hand that they employed throughout the match, like using the wrench that, got a big reaction, but it's not much more than just holding it onto somebody's head. The same thing with the table legs. They were very creative and memorable spots that got great reactions, but didn't really do that much damage, in my opinion, to the performers. And so much of it, I think, was accentuated by the fact that you had blood, so you conveyed just the damage anyway. So the bag of beads, a perfect example. It probably got as big of a reaction as Thumbtacks would have in 2024. And Jericho, has kind of been a great example of the mystery of what's in the bag of beads and the reveal that it's hockey pucks. It kind of gets a big reaction just because it's different and because it's memorable. At its core, I thought this was a great wrestling match that just kind of happened to have a cell around it. And the focus on storytelling was just absolutely perfect, I would say. A great ending to this feud.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same thoughts. I thought that this was a tremendous Hell in a Cell match that they didn't have to do anything that was, there's a certain level you have to go to, but they had number one, a great crowd, and they had built up to all these different things that kind of paid themselves off. They promised blood. They even, like, whether you enjoyed the stuff with the bracelet or not, that had its own chapter in it. The portion about when you're on your knees praying for me, they, like, all these things were kind of just like tying up all the loose ends that they had introduced in this as the definitive blow off match. If I had to say anything, I just thought like this was just such a great match that I didn't think anything touched this really until like the closing portion of the main event. I don't think that affected the crowd, though. This was a crowd that was into everything on this show. So you can, it certainly did not harm things that way. If I was structuring this, I really think you could have just, I'm not the biggest fan of you put your second biggest match first, but that's the WWE layout of things that they do these. If you're not the main event, then you're typically opening the show. So that's what they went with here. I just thought this was such a major start to the show that it was just, to me, nothing after this really followed it, instead of a show that kind of builds towards this. But this was easily my match of the show, and I thought this was just tremendous. And more importantly, when they do opt to do Hell in a Cell next time, how much more impact it's going to have after they have set the bar back at this level for this match. Like, they turn back the clock for a lot of people that had kind of, listen, we have a generation that have grown up where I don't think the Hell in a Cell concept has meant what it has, when we're talking about like 20 years ago, when it was a very effective tool to sell pay-per-views.
I think so that was their goal, seemingly, ahead of this, to reestablish and rebuild the Hell in a Cell. I think they've effectively done that. I think they've also created now a promise of blood for Hell in a Cell, and again, real or fake, we'll find out. But like,
they've also promised beads now that you have to also be aware will
blood and
every Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, blood, beads, and wrenches. If you like this video, consider joining our Patreon, the Post Wrestling Cafe. Multiple bonus podcasts every week, ad-free shows, and access to our full archive. Otherwise, a like and subscribe is much appreciated. Thank you for watching.